When a franchise has enough staying power to last over the course of nearly 3 decades, it's inevitable that the formula is changed to a certain degree. Experimentation to try and improve a series in a positive new direction, and from these changes can often create subsects of a franchise as a whole. This is exemplified in no better way than with Need for Speed. The franchise is distinctively split into what I like to name 4 separate categories. The classic entries consisting of the first 5 games, from the first, the Need for Speed, all the way up to Need for Speed Porsche Unleashed. This was then succeeded by what's referred to as either the Black Box or the Golden Era, consisting of titles from Hot Pursuit 2 all the way to Undercover and Pro Street. These titles being very distinctive on their focus on street culture, customization, and building your way through the ranks. This then starkly contrasted by the next era, what I like to call the Supercar Era. Consisting of Hot Pursuit 2010 to Rivals, this era was very different in its choice of cars, shifting from the more tuner-focused affordable sports car to the highest of high-end super and hypercars blasting around at the highest conceivable speeds. Gone was the idea of working your way up to a high sense of speed, instead starting up fast and becoming even faster. This all finally capped off with the modern, or what I like to name the Ghost Era, being characterized by the chasing of that Golden Era. Very similar games with little variation, very similar structures, just on a different map. People of course have their favorites of these separate eras, usually the one that they grew up with. And this of course leads to a lot of discourse surrounding which is best. And today I want to focus on the Supercar Era, which is perhaps the most polarizing phase in Need for Speed history. After nearly a decade of tuner-focused street racing entries, the jump to high-octane racing, harkening back to the series' roots, was brought back in Need for Speed Hot Pursuit 2010. And was certainly jarring for some, even more so when the next 3 following mainline entries all followed a similar format. While some enjoyed the transition and viewed it as a nice breath of fresh air, many saw it as a betrayal of what Need for Speed was in its newest identity. The old format obviously worked, so why try something new and unnecessary? You'd think this would be a vocal minority of people, considering most of these games were reviewed positively by professional game reviewers. However, dig through the community and look at audience scores, and you'll see far more controversy, with many figureheads in the community speaking outwardly against these games. The result of which being EA themselves desperately trying to claw its way back to its old success by hiring Ghost to recreate one of the poorest trilogies in modern racing history. But why is this? Many people will always be averse to change, but what was wrong with these Supercar Era games to the point of such vocal outcry? To my knowledge, it comes down to a few things. First is the lack of customization. It's a very petty argument, but some in the community value vehicle customization above all else. So when this era of games featured a car list with very little to no customization, people were very upset. These same people also seem to miss the context of these games' lists. While games like Most Wanted, Underground, and Carbon feature a lot more grassroots first car style tuning-centric options, the games of the Supercar Era feature, well, as the name would intend, supercars and hypercars. These rides tend to feature very little, if not no, tuning scenes in real life, even more so in modern games. Customization on these hypercars is starkly lacking in comparison to the cheaper options. So in a game focused on going as fast as possible, things like customization are features that inherently need to be left behind in favor of refining mechanics. Another point of contention among the people who dislike this Supercar Era is the subject of vehicle weaponry, specifically what was seen in Hot Pursuit and Rivals. Many claim that the weapons in these games are unrealistic and non-immersive, when we're playing video games about driving supercars at hundreds of miles an hour on roads where this would be impossible. That of course is why we play these games. It isn't realistic. You can't do this in real life. On the opposite side of the spectrum, there are people who will say that that feeling of hitting a turbo in Hot Pursuit 2010 is unmatched in any other racing game, and they're right for that. The idea of vehicle weapons being a stain on these games is again in my opinion a bad faith argument, just looking to try and find any reason to be upset with these games. The vehicle weapons absolutely add an extra layer of depth and strategy to these games that would be missing otherwise. A clever use of spikes or getting someone in a checkmate with a smart use of an EMP is a satisfying feeling in both of these games that I certainly wouldn't want to go without. Now of course, the biggest point of contention when it comes to this era of games comes down to one title in particular, Need for Speed Most Wanted 2012. The disdain for this game is immense. On launch, many people believed we would be getting a direct sequel to the Most Wanted that everyone knew and loved. So when 2012 released and was nothing like its 2005 counterpart, people were very upset. The fans expected a similar level of story, progression, the same over-the-top vibes and tuning culture, customization and soundtrack. So when you were dumped into a Porsche 911 and given access to any car upon simply finding it, many people were upset. The thing is, while it may not have been just like its predecessor, it did bring its own take on what Most Wanted meant. Intense police chases, a solid open world, a far more seamless gameplay experience, and a phenomenal multiplayer. Is it, quote, Most Wanted? Yes. But it is not Most Wanted 2005, and some people just can't accept that. It's unfortunate that many people overlook Most Wanted 2012's great qualities for what they actually can be, because under all of the perceived deception is a solid racing game. The idea that it has no progression is a misinformed argument on the basis that it simply isn't true. There exists progression in that of unlocking the highest end cars of the game, and every car upgrade does indeed have to be earned through racing. Most Wanted 2012 isn't quite the sandbox that most people think it is, but due to the way that it marketed itself, many people didn't give the game a chance, and in turn, this soured the thoughts of the games surrounding it in its legacy. It's unfortunate, but it's the truth that these quality games get a bad rap for such shallow reasons, often all surrounding this single controversial game. And in turn, games of a much lesser quality and substance get praised simply for doing things that games of the Supercar era didn't do in order to appease fans. It's now an unfortunate repeating cycle that's reached all the way up to Unbound. Gone are the days when EA will try something new with Need for Speed, because you will inevitably hate it, even though it's only because of change that we got that golden black box era in the first place. It's a damn shame too, because this era of Need for Speed is probably the most unique set of racing games we've had in a long time. Nowadays, every racing game is striving to be the next Forza Horizon, the best open world sandbox for you to play in. Gone are the days of tight-knit, well-designed roads for you to take your cars down, the intricate highways and structured of Most Wanted, along with one of the most fun and creative map expansions with the addition of the airport. You could drive underneath this airport, on the runway, into and through the passageways, drive onto the planes and fly off of their wings. And if you really wanted to, you could drive on top of the airport and fly all the way down as if you yourself were a plane. The way Hot Pursuit had its scenery structured so perfectly, so you see the most incredible sights while blasting at high speeds. I could gush endlessly about how beautiful it is to take the twisty turns up in the snowy mountains or absolutely blitz the beach side with a turbo. The Run also containing some of the best set pieces seen in a racing game to this day. The race in which you outrun an avalanche to safety is something that just hasn't been recaptured in the modern day, with all of these racing games doing their best to play it safe out of fear of offending. It's really unfortunate to see such amazing ideas get phased out for the same stock standard schlop we've had for nearly a decade now. For that reason, I find it important that we remember and treasure this Supercar era of Need for Speed for daring to be different, daring to try something new and succeeding, but being lambasted for it. And it's for that reason, it's not likely we are ever going to get a game so heavily stylized and creative like these anymore. And again, it's for that reason we cherish these games and talk about them, because the best that we're probably gonna get is remasters, like with No Pursuit 2010. We can hope all we want, but the fans of the franchise have made it clear that superficial changes mean more than innovation.